So you filed for bankruptcy. You made all your payments on time in a Chapter 11 or Chapter 13, or you obtained the discharge in a Chapter 7, and you've now come out on the other end of bankruptcy, and you're expecting that fresh start that they promised you, that now your credit report is going to be clean. All those bad accounts and late accounts have been discharged and reporting was zero balance. But as it turns out, they're not. They didn't get the credit reporting right. Multiple creditors are reporting inaccurate data on your credit report and you still can't get a loan. What are you going to do? Hi, I'm Hugo Blankingship, and this is my law partner, Tom Christiano, and we represent consumers in cases like this. And this video is going to talk to you about some of the issues that you can do, some of the solutions that you can get when you have an issue with a bankruptcy inaccuracy. Tom, what's the first thing you want to do when you find out that something is inaccurate after your bankruptcy?
After your bankruptcy, it's recommended that you review your credit file 3 to 6 months after the discharge. What you want to do is look at the credit report from the credit reporting agency to see what's actually reporting. Now, you've probably been notified, as you mentioned, that there's an account that's past due or you didn't get that fresh start that you were promised. So the first step is to review your credit report for the problems. The bad news with bankruptcy credit inaccuracies is they can be a bit of a problem with different people reporting different things. So you're really going to have to carefully go through your credit file and see what creditor is reporting, what chapter of bankruptcy they're reporting, are they reporting the debt accurately, and thoroughly review your credit file to ensure that anything that should have been included in the bankruptcy is properly credit reported. Hugo, is there any particular item you think makes sense for people to look at when they're reviewing? Or
Yeah, the thing is that when you're talking about a bankruptcy and a discharge and you're looking at a credit report after post-bankruptcy, it's a little complicated. And you assume that you're going to look at all these accounts and they're all going to report the same. But the problem is that they don't report the same. Some are going to be different. Some will be correct. Some will be inaccurate. And so it's very important that you probably hire a lawyer to assist you if you have questions and you think that something is inaccurate. Now, the first thing that we're going to look for is after you filed for bankruptcy, are they going to show that you were ever late? Okay. Once you file, that month that you file, it should not be reporting as late on your credit report. Okay. That's when it stops. And now you are in bankruptcy and ultimately going to be discharged in bankruptcy. What about some of the other ones, Tom?
Well, the other ones include items that have the wrong chapter reported, where you are entitled to a Chapter 7 discharge and it reports as a 13, or vice versa, that a 13 instead of a 7. Typically, in the Chapter 13 bankruptcy, you're probably going to see some sort of reaffirmation of a mortgage or a car loan, and those debts shouldn't be reported like a Chapter 7 is, where it's a total walk away from the loan. So it really can be highly specific to your situation, and that is another reason why getting a lawyer involved with your credit report is necessary in this instance. You know, a lot of times people coming out of bankruptcy, they're looking to reestablish their credit, and they know they're vulnerable because they filed for bankruptcy, and consumers are not going to be able to just go get access credit like a typical consumer that hasn't filed for bankruptcy. And that's why having any late payment that should have been cleared by the bankruptcy, like you discussed, is just devastating, because not only does it look like the person filed bankruptcy, but it still looks like they're still late after the bankruptcy filing. So it's just a nightmare, and a creditor is not going to want to extend the loan to someone who has been late after a bankruptcy. So if you filed for bankruptcy and you start reestablishing your credit, it's critical to keep making those payments on time. So when you're determining what kind of errors on your credit report, you got to make sure that every little detail is correct in this instance, right, Hugo?
Yeah, and one of the other errors that is important to look for is that once you file for bankruptcy, is it going to show that there's a balance? There's an outstanding balance due. That's one of the things you want to look at these trade lines. So it should not report as any balance that's due, because that's been paid off or it's been discharged. And then you were again talking about if it's a late, it's confusing, and it looks like maybe you were late on making your payments in a Chapter 11 or Chapter 13. So there's a lot of technical aspects in bankruptcy that need to get corrected. So, what's the first thing you're going to do if you discover there is an inaccuracy?
Well, as usual with any inaccuracy, you're going to write a credit dispute letter to the credit reporting agencies. Now, as we covered in other videos, you want to write a good dispute letter that's descriptive, but it's particularly important in these credit dispute letters involving a prior bankruptcy, is I like to see the consumer actually send to the credit reporting agency what they are reporting, because it's easier. You can circle or make a note on it. Hey, this just should be discharged. This is a 7, not a 13, or whatever your specific fact pattern is. So reporting bankruptcy items is critical to get correct on the credit dispute letter.
And normally we don't suggest that consumers are going to send in a copy of their Equifax or TransUnion credit files directly back to the credit reporting agencies. But in bankruptcy, because it is so complicated and it is so difficult, we do suggest that. And I think your idea of highlighting or circling that and sending it back to them and pointing exactly what the portion of the trade line is that's inaccurate is a great idea. I definitely encourage that as well.
And the other thing I think you're going to need to do is you're going to need your record from the bankruptcy court. So the discharge order, your petition that was filed, these are all electronic items that your lawyer can give you, or you can get from the court's website, because the bankruptcy court is a federal court on the PACER system. So really that discharge order is going to show the date it was discharged. The petition for bankruptcy is going to show the date it was filed. So you get the benefit of the filing date and no late payments from there. So like you talked about earlier in the video. So really, as part of the dispute letter, just like any dispute letter, you need good supporting documentation, and the discharge petition or the discharge order and the petition for bankruptcy are often the two critical items that need to be seen.
Yes, the petition that you filed is important because it does verify that this particular account was included in bankruptcy. There are some times when the bankruptcy lawyer fails to identify one of your accounts and doesn't include it. Now, it's ultimately going to get discharged as part of it, even though it's not included in there. But it's important to send in the petition that listed all of the accounts. And then you can say, yeah, see, here's this Verizon account that I had, and that debt has been discharged, and it should not be reporting the way it is. So, yes, that's a really important one.
Right. And then the other thing, when you have a chapter 13 or even a chapter 11 scenario, is the proof that you've been making payments in accordance with the bankruptcy plan. That's another item that you could include in the credit dispute letter.
Yeah, and once you have that and you've detailed it pretty carefully, and you've highlighted or circled or put arrows towards the portions that are there, then you also want to explain it. So it's good to draft a letter that actually explains to the credit reporting agencies and to whoever the furnisher is, look, this is the account that I'm complaining about. This is what it should be reporting as, and this is why it's reporting inaccurately. And if you do that, then you have a pretty good dispute letter. It's still good to plan to get a lawyer to help you on this one. What do you think about that, Tom?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the complexity of the bankruptcy is really critical to have a lawyer to explain why this debt was included or why this debt is being paid as in accordance with a proper bankruptcy plan. Most consumers they know they filed bankruptcy and they know they're entitled to the protections of the stay and the discharge of debt, but they don't know the nitty gritty of how the interaction between the credit reporting of those accounts and what the bankruptcy court accomplished, in my opinion.
Yeah, and one thing that a lot of consumers don't understand is that when they're talking to a credit reporting lawyer that does this for a living, that they can normally take these cases on a contingency fee or percentage fee basis, which means that you're not going to have to come out of pocket and pay thousands of dollars to the lawyer to help you try to correct this, that they'll be able to do it on a contingency fee basis, and they're not going to get paid until they collect damages from the furnishers or the credit reporting agencies for not correcting something. So don't be afraid to hire a lawyer, because it's probably not going to cost you anything out of pocket.
Right. And the damages, just because you filed bankruptcy in the past, the damages, you're so vulnerable because you really can't afford to have late payments after you file a bankruptcy. So any kind of hint that you filed bankruptcy, tried to reestablish, and you have late payments after the bankruptcy, you're going to have a very difficult time getting any credit with those fact patterns. And that's why it's so critical to look at your credit file and make sure everything is reporting accuracy after the bankruptcy, because you're just simply not going to get a loan if you have late payments. If you file bankruptcy and 2 years later you're suddenly late on everything again, you're not going to get a loan. And if you've actually been paying on your debts and used the bankruptcy fresh start appropriately, then you really are entitled to the benefit of your accurate credit report at that point in time. And sure, your interest rate might be a little higher, but you shouldn't be getting denied credit. And it can cost you the ability to start getting lower rates and maybe even a newer car or a newer used car just because they're not reporting accurate information after the bankruptcy. And these are all the types of damages that are recoverable under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, including the distress you go to. Hugo, bankruptcy people have a particular kind of distress, don't they?
They do, because they've been very stressed out. Normally, somebody lost a job, or you had some large financial problem that's caused you to get into this situation, and now you're in there and you're just looking to put an end to it. And you've gone through, particularly if you've gone through 11 or 13, you've been in the program for a couple of years and you've been making all your payments on time. You feel like you've really rehabilitated everything and you've done all the things you're supposed to. And then you come out on the other side and there's some credit reporting problems. The one thing I'm gonna tell you is this is complicated, as we've said. Don't assume that they're getting it right. Okay, you need to verify, check and verify. Do not assume that either the credit reporting agencies or the furnishers are getting it right, because there's a good chance they're not.
Right. And when you send your dispute letter, you're going to get back into the loop of how the credit reporting agencies process disputes and how the furnishers of the information investigate disputes. And as we previously covered in other videos, they're not putting the resources into these investigations. They're taking your complex bankruptcy scenario and putting it into digital code. And the digital code is not right in the first instance. That's why they're not reporting that you were involved in bankruptcy and the debt was discharged. So it's the same problem. It's a repeated abuse that we see, whether it's identity theft inaccuracies or accuracies after bankruptcy. It's the same problem, as because the root of all evil is the failure to reasonably reinvestigate consumer disputes.
And we've had a number of bankruptcy cases in which we've been able to help the client get it corrected, move on, and move forward with their life. And that's ultimately what you really hope and you really wanted once you filed for bankruptcy.
Right. And you're entitled to that. That's the whole point of filing bankruptcy. You mentioned earlier in the video, I don't think people typically choose to file bankruptcy in the sense that they just don't want to pay debt. A lot of them, if you look at it, they get sick or they have a major negative life event of a job loss. And oftentimes they're very responsible with their credit right up to the point where this horrible life event happens. And if you've been sick or you lose your job, I mean, you might have to have had filed bankruptcy, but that doesn't mean you're a forever bad credit risk. And there is hope. And I think you should understand that if you're going through that right now, that you can reach out to our firm and we can try to help you out.
Absolutely. We'll be more than happy to help you out and make sure that they finally get it corrected and it looks the way it's supposed to look at the end of the bankruptcy.
Well said, Hugo. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Please look for other videos on inaccurate identity theft, family identity theft, and Verizon and other collection accounts that can report inaccurately. In the meantime, take care of your credit and dispute any inaccuracies.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.